Good evening. Welcome to today's webinar, Charting Canada's Submarine Future, the Path to a Modern Naval Fleet. I'm Andrew Erskine, Research Fellow at the Institute for Peace and Diplomacy. IPD is a Canadian nonpartisan think tank dedicated to promoting ideas that support diplomacy, constructive engagement, and prudent realism in international affairs. As a nation with the world's largest coastline, Canada faces complex and evolving maritime challenges. Our current fleet of 4 Victorian-class submarines, acquired secondhand in the early 2000s, is increasingly costly to maintain and ill-suited for the demands of modern defense. In response, the Government of Canada has initiated the Canadian Patrol Submarine Project, aiming to acquire up to 12 conventionally powered submarines. This initiative is a key component of the recent defense policy update, Our North, Strong and Free, which underscores the necessity of a robust and adaptable naval force to safeguard our sovereignty and contribute meaningfully to global security efforts. Today's panel brings together leading experts to explore the strategic, technical, and industrial dimensions of this ambitious project. Together, we will examine the capabilities required for a modern submarine fleet, the potential partnerships with international manufacturers, and the implications on Canada's defense posture in the Arctic and beyond. I would also like to remind our audience that you can engage with our panelists by posing a question in the chat box. I will be monitoring the box throughout our discussion and will pick the questions from there during our Q&A. Before we get into today's discussion, I have the privilege of offering the floor to Mr. Trygve Bedinski to deliver the keynote address. Mr. Bedinski serves as Norway's head of mission in Oslo. Before arriving in 2024, Mr. Bedinski was Director for Energy, Climate, and Environment at Norway's Ministry of Foreign Affairs in Oslo. He has also served as Sherpa for the Prime Minister of Norway on renewable energy and the Global Energy Alliance for People and Planet, and as Deputy Director for Latin America and the Caribbean at Norway's Ministry for Foreign Affairs. Mr. Bedinski, thank you for taking the time to join us today for this webinar, and I would like to offer you the floor.
Thank you, Andrew, and it's such a pleasure being here. I'm delighted to be invited, so very much looking forward to this panel. And I will say a little bit about Norway security policy, our relationship with the Arctic, and our relationship with Canada, and then talk briefly about our submarine program. So as most of you probably know, Norway is a founding member of NATO, and we have a very close relationship with the European Union, but we're not members, but we are economically integrated with the EU and cooperate very closely with them on a long range of issues. We do have a long coastline facing the Atlantic, and a very large part of our territory and close to 10% of our population lives above the Arctic Circle. So the Arctic is hugely important for us. We also have a short border with Russia, 196 kilometers long. So it's also a defining geographical feature for our security and foreign policy. Norway has very large territorial waters, our economic zone. It's key for us. So historically, fisheries, everything maritime transportation has been defining for who we are as a nation and for economy. And for these past 50 years, also energy, particularly oil and gas, but in the future also wind power and other things. So the Atlantic and the maritime, it's hugely important for us and has been defining for us in our geopolitical approach. I was asked also to say a little bit about the future. And I'll be very brief just to say that NATO is and will remain the cornerstone of our security policy. Since Russia's full-scale invasion of Ukraine, we have massively scaled up our defense spending. So we're currently this year at about 2.3%, and we're going at 3% quite shortly. And again, the scale up is having an impact on all the branches of our military. And we're also investing in new capabilities. Of course, the F-35s, most, I think all now pretty much have been delivered to Norway. We are currently looking at procuring new frigates, and of course submarines that I will get back to shortly, and many other things. I want to say that Russia is the defining threat for us. I'm sure you're all aware of a lot of things that have been going on subsea infrastructure. It's a huge concern for us, and also cyber. So the relationship with Russia critical and defining for us in foreign and security policy terms. Then briefly about our relationship with Canada. Canada is a natural ally for us. We do have a very close relationship. Our armed forces have been collaborating for many years. I was recently giving a speech at Canadian Armed Forces College. Most of the men and women in uniform there had been to Norway at least once for training and other purposes. And of course, this is ongoing, and there's great mutual benefit in learning and exchanging experiences. And we do share a very close, same perspective on foreign policy, security policy challenges. 2 years back, we signed a new MOU on security and collaboration with Canada. And then last year also our Coast Guard signed a letter of intent. So I think this partnership is very strong, and it is growing in the future and becoming even closer. And of course, with Canada also, we share our perspective understanding of the key defining issues for us. The Arctic, of course, being one, and this is also reflected in Canada's security policy strategies and foreign policy also for the Arctic. But I would also like to mention, in addition to that, the security aspect on the Arctic and what it means for us. We also collaborate closely on a lot of other issues, such as on Indigenous peoples, a very close contacts there, on climate change, which of course is having a big impact on the Arctic. We do have extensive research collaboration between a large number of Canadian universities and universities in Norway. And also on the business side, our relationship is growing. I mentioned maritime, everything maritime, which is still important for both of us. And then fisheries, health, defense industry becoming more important, mining, energy, and a lot more. So I think that sums up a little bit the main points, and then a few words about our submarine program. So for us, modern submarines, they are absolutely essential for monitoring and deterring foreign incursions. And as I did speak to, and as you are all well aware, we do have this large maritime area that is, that there's a good level of activity from other countries there, and our proximity to Russia as well. We before entering into our submarine program, we did assess a number of different options for our submarines, but we did land on the 212CD German-produced submarines, and I'll go a little bit more into detail why. But key for us is that they are specifically designed for operations in cold and challenging environments, and that's why we thought they were the ideal choice for us. There were some other considerations as well. A shared submarine platform with key NATO allies strengthens our interoperability, provides for intelligence sharing and collective deterrence. So there is a key point there about scale and how we can jointly secure NATO's northern flank. I think another key point for us was that the program was quite advanced and currently is already in production. And these subs, they provide stealth, endurance, and as I said, Arctic operability. Yes, and again, these subs extensive capabilities regarding special operations, cold weather conditions, which we think are very beneficial. And the 212A, which is a very similar model to the one that we are procuring, they are already in operation. So just a little bit more on the interoperability side. So a lot happening there now on joint training, logistics, spare parts sharing, and we know that working with a partner on this, it will reduce life cycle costs and continue to ensure common operational capabilities. What's happening in Norway now with the subs is that we are building up our maintenance expertise, which will be critical for the long-term naval development. And I think the whole industrial piece here for us, although we are a small partner in this program, it's just very valuable, and it ensures the long-term sustainability and the cost effectiveness of operating these subs in the time ahead. So there's a very good blueprint here, we think, and we are aware that other countries are also looking at our submarine, Norwegian submarine program with great interest. So again, just to sum up a little bit, for us, the submarine program that we chose, it was a cost-effective but equally important low-risk solution compared to, let's say, less mature project. And all in all, and this was the basis for our decision, that we thought it did offer the best balance of capability, affordability, and alliance cohesion, while avoiding, again, the risk of other projects that were less mature. So that's briefly what I thought I'd say about our submarine program, and it will, be a key component of our defense and time ahead. That's all from me, Andrew. And again, thank you very much for this opportunity to speak, and I'm looking forward to the continuation.
No, thank you, Mr. Budinsky. And your remarks, I think, ring home for any of the Canadians listening to the webinar for our Canadian panelists. There's very similarities, although I would argue that Canada's a little bit behind, whether it's increasing, our GDP to NATO spending. Obviously, you indicated the F-35s. We're currently in the discussion right now with the controversy around that platform, given the current relationship with the United States, but also with new frigates. Canada is finally making some headway on its River-class destroyers, and then obviously your submarine procurement system, right? Cost-effective, low-risk purchase, and interoperability. Ensuring that there is a large network of spare parts, capability sharing, all the way from logistics to operationality. I think that will be something driving the discussion forward for when Canada begins its serious discussions as to who we will, become partners with to procure these new submarines. So thank you very much for those remarks. I'd now like to just quickly pivot and begin today's discussion by introducing our panelists. First, I have Dr. Joo-Yoon Kim. Dr. Kim currently serves as president at the Security Management Institute, a defense think tank affiliated with the South Korean National Assembly. He has also been involved in numerous defense projects and has provided consultations to several key organizations, including the Republic of Korea Joint Chiefs of Staff, the Defense Acquisition Program Administration, the Ministry of National Defense, the Korea Institute of Defense Analysis, the Agency for Defense Development, and the Korean Research Institute for Defense Technology Planning and Advancement. Next, I have Robin Allers. Robin works as associate professor at the Norwegian Institute for Defense Studies and the Norwegian Defense University College in Oslo. His research and teaching focuses on European security and Norway's relations with close allies such as Germany. He is currently program manager for the Masters in Military Studies, Norway's highest military education. Next, I have Dr. Adam Longinus. Adam is an associate professor and chair of the Public Policy and Governance program at St. Francis Xavier University. Currently a Fulbright scholar as well for 2024-2025. He is part of the Foundation's Arctic Initiative, where he's continuing work on information operations, begun as a Killam Scholar in 2024 at the University of Calgary. Adam is also the Arctic and Maritime Security Chair at the Brian Mulroney Institute of Government and the Director of the Canadian Maritime Security Network. In addition, he is a research coordinator at the Naval Association of Canada and a fellow at the Canadian Global Affairs Institute. And lastly, we have Captain Retired Norman Jolin. Norman is an associate consultant with CFN Consultants, specializing in naval and maritime issues. Prior to joining CFN, he provided advice on Canadian defense procurement in the private sector, following a very long 37-year career in the Royal Canadian Navy. So, gentlemen, welcome to today's webinar. So, to get the discussion going and to hear some opening remarks, I would like to pose these two questions together because I think they really encapsulate what this webinar is trying to get at. And that is, why is having submarines important for a country's sea domain? What capabilities does it offer for contributing to deterrence, sea denial, and control operations? And because obviously we're focusing on Canada, what does Canada need for a new fleet of submarines? And what are the strategic risks Ottawa is trying to mitigate by pursuing the Canadian Patrol Submarine Project? Norman, I would like to hear your thoughts first.
Get off mute here. Thank you very much, Andrew. Thank you, everything. Ambassador, thank you for joining that. I appreciate that. Very quickly, to mash the two questions together, I guess from the submarine perspective, you asked, why is it important for a country's sea domain? It's the only thing that gives you persistent surveillance over a long time. I mean, aircraft can go out for many hours, ships can go out for a few things, but submarines can be out there for a whole time. And between the three of them, they give you control of the entire water column. You got to know what's going on in there. And the beauty about a submarine is it allows you to do something about it because it's got heavyweight weapons. It also, causes an adversary, just the threat of a submarine causes adversary to put in disproportional amount of resources to counter that threat. So, and that's detect and find it and everything. And submarines, you asked about things about deterrence, sea denial, and that control. They're great for choke points. So somewhere a transitor has to come through, they have to come through, and they're great gatekeepers, and they can do something about it. In conjunction with other assets too, but the submarines are always there. To follow on your question about Canada, why do we need a new fleet of submarines, and what risks Ottawa mitigate by pursuing the Canadian Patrol Submarine Project? Well, simple fact is they got to replace the Victoria class because they're at end of life. Those submarines were designed in the late 70s, early 80s. I was on exchange with the British submarines at the time. They were built in the late 80s, early 90s. They're coming up to 50 years of life, when you put all into it. And they, by the end of the 2030s, they have to go. They can't be extended. But submarines are part of a balanced Navy. You just don't have bits and bobs. You need the whole thing. So absolute necessity to maintain, as I said earlier, that control of what's going on surveillance-wise in the entire column, whether it's above the water, on the water, or beneath the water. When you ask about strategic risk, I'd argue, is it strategic risk or strategic employment? So what? Okay, what's the threat to Canada? The threat to Canada is exactly the same it has been throughout the Cold War. It hasn't gone away. We just haven't talked about it. The threat to Canada is a missile-firing submarine. That's a threat to the homeland. It's much the same in other niches in the world, and certainly that. So for Canada, we always looked at the European away game for the Cold War. It's a home game. Has always been the missile-firing submarine, whether it's ballistic missiles being fired up north, coming over, but more importantly now, it's a cruise missile-firing submarine. Why? Because cruise missiles are fired at a much shorter distance. You have much less reaction time. They go really, really fast, and they're maneuvering. And that's something you got to do. It's the only way you can do that is take out the shooter. And that's why submarines are so critically important. That's a strategic risk to Canada because that's the only risk to the homeland. It's North America. And the last time we saw that manifested to the extent we're seeing that now was in October 1962. And that's exactly what the threat was. So that's my thought processes.
Thank you, Norman. I would now like to just shift to the other Canadian on the panel, and that's you, Adam. Building off from what Norman was saying in terms of having that platform that can have access to the subsea surface and the maritime and sea domain being essential, and then obviously having that deterrent ability to something which I agree with Norman, which isn't heavily discussed anymore, like it was during the Corps, which is targeting an adversary's missile capabilities, whether it's intercontinental ballistic missiles or cruise missiles, and even now with the threats of hypersonic missiles. Same thing to you. Why are submarines important for a country sea domain? And then same thing, pivot towards why Canada is desperately in a time of a need for a new submarine fleet.
Well, looking at the Arctic, which is my expertise, I think, Norm, you hit on a lot of those important points, and the word deterrence is a really important one. Now, Norm, you talked about deterrent for state adversaries, obviously critical. But in the Arctic, what we're also starting to see is a requirement for a deterrent for non-state adversaries. This could mean hostile or malign civilian actors or quasi or proxy state actors. Everything from what we see in the Pacific, maritime militia, state-sponsored fishing fleets, or even as we're now seeing, ELINT vessels or cable cutters. The idea that a region is unsupervised, that we do not have eyes on the Arctic or other parts of Canada's, exclusive economic zone or territorial waters, it's dangerous. Now, a submarine, as Norm, you mentioned, has that persistent presence, but it has a secret persistent presence. So even when we're not there, even if we're not sitting in the Davis Strait, those adversaries, be they state or non-state actors, they don't know that we're not there. So that provides that critical deterrence, beyond simply the hard defense, but leaking into the security and even the sort of the safety part of the defense spectrum. So that deterrence is important. From a international relations perspective, it's also very important that Canada has assets to contribute to the defense of North America. We can go back to Brian Mulroney in the 1980s talking about, we can only have so much sovereignty as we're willing to pay for. I actually hate that quote because this is not about sovereignty, it's about security, but it gives you an idea of the Canadian mentality. If we are not willing to put up resources and assets to support the North American combined defense, then we are, in essence, giving the defense of a good chunk of the Canadian state to the US. Now, that was not a very attractive proposition in the 80s, 90s, and the aughts. Donald Trump 2.0, it has become suddenly far less attractive. This is a man who's now trying to annex big chunks of the Arctic and perhaps even Canada. So there's a new political dynamic at play where we need to not only be present for our own security purposes, but there's all kinds of new and unsettling political ramifications as well.
Perfect. Thank you, Adam. And now to round out the rest of the panels, I'd now like to move to Dr. Kim. And get your sense, obviously, from a South Korean, but also an Indo-Pacific perspective of why submarines are crucial for your country's sea domain, and then maybe direct any kind of visions from an outside lens as to your opinions on Canada purchasing a new fleet of submarines and how that can affect its defense collaboration and its presence and its capabilities, not just in the Arctic or North America, but as well as with its obligations and its growing strategic interest in the Indo-Pacific.
Okay, I would like to focus on the stealth factor. Well, stealth is crucial for deterrence, as submarines, whether equipped with conventional or nuclear weapons, can position themselves unpredictably, creating ambiguity for potential adversaries. And this uncertainty prevents enemies from making aggressive moves, knowing that a submarine could be lurking undetected, ready to strike when necessary. And in addition, submarines are particularly effective in sea denial operations, where they can prevent enemy vessels from accessing strategically critical maritime areas, such as the Arctic, as you pointed out, but in addition, vital choke points in the Pacific. The combination of advanced weaponry, including precision-guided missiles and torpedoes, and underwater mobility allows submarines to target both surface ships and other submarines, effectively denying an adversary control over these critical maritime regions. And furthermore, maritime submarines are pivotal in sea control. They are uniquely positioned to monitor, detect, and neutralize enemy naval vessels in a manner that disrupts the enemy's ability to maintain domain over key maritime routes. And for Canada, which must secure its vast Arctic region and maritime choke points, submarines are an indispensable tool in safeguarding national sovereignty and securing freedom of navigation in an increasingly contested global maritime environment. And for South Korea, submarines serve as a vital part of maintaining security in the highly sensitive Indo-Pacific region, where maritime tensions are high and control over strategic waterways is crucial. And coming back to the Canadian Patrol Submarine Project, why is it critical for replacing Canada's aging Victoria-class submarines? Is that which are increasingly becoming less reliable, less capable of addressing the evolving maritime security challenges in Canada's expansive northern and global maritime domains. And I think the urgency of this modernization is compounded by the strategic risks that Canada faces, particularly in the Arctic, as you've pointed out, where the effects of climate change are rapidly opening up new shipping routes and increasing international interest in the region's untapped resources. And I think this changing environment invites competition from other nations, potentially threatening Canadian sovereignty over these vital waters. And for that reason, Canada's Arctic defense will rely on submarines that are capable of operating in extreme cold, under ice, and across vast distances, which will require advanced ice reforms hulls and long endurance systems such as the AIB. That's my response. Thank you.
No, thank you, Dr. Kim. And I think your point on the stealth component is very spot on given the current environment, as well as the capabilities and the accessibility of, like you said, patrolling, and then maybe in an operation having those choke points and ensuring that they are not used in a negative way, or that you can counteract those subsea geographies for your advantages. So thank you very much, Robin. We'll round out with you. Going from what Mr. Turbinsky indicated, is there anything you want to add to that? And given your expertise and your familiarity with the Norwegian German submarine procurement program, same thing to you. When it comes to Canada acquiring a new submarine fleet, from your perspective, what is it that the Norwegian German program can offer Canada? But how has it been used towards the Norwegian submarine capabilities, ensuring that they have a deterrent capability, but also the ability to sustain long-term presence in critical choke points and critical waters off their shores?
Hello, yeah, thanks for having me. And actually, yes, I have to build on what the head of mission has been saying, but also can subscribe to very much to what my the previous speakers have been said. I think it would be interesting to say a few words on changing security context, because when Norway was in this situation to decide on whether to replace its aging Ula-class submarines, that was in the mid-2000s, in an entirely different security context. At the time, we were discussing, focusing on international operations, terrorist threats. We were at a time of shrinking budgets. Norway actually spent 10 years almost to assess, evaluate, write reports, engage commissions to evaluate if it needed a submarine force at all. In this time, as you might remember, there was also the option not to replace it, like Denmark did for a small country. So Norway, which you naturally associate with such a submarine force traditionally, actually used a lot of time to discuss these three options: renew, prolong the existing operational lifetime of the existing class, or abandon it, this key capability. So already in 2014, when the decision was finally made to buy new submarines, the security context was about to change. It was the time of Russia's invasion to Crimea, and so already then the reports, the government strategic documents were written in a completely different tone than the years before. It was absolutely clear that Norway would have to invest not only in submarines but also in fighter jets, F-35, in maritime patrol aircraft, and also in the special forces, all that were considered strategic capabilities than you need in such a security environment. If we switch to today's situation, I mean, this whole discussion seems absurd. Today, it's natural for Norway that its traditional task on the northern flank, surveying, Russian submarines coming from the Barents Sea, strategic submarines going through the Bear Gap, going through the Gap into the North Atlantic, potentially threatening Canada and the US. This is the key task for Norwegian submarines. Follow them, survey them, but also deter, of course, attacks. So it's a different context from the Cold War, although much of the tasks a submarine has are the same as today. But the context is also changing, and as we know, these procurement processes they take a long time. They can take years, and sometimes I think today the situation would be different. Today, this decision would be made much quicker. So this is also something that actually affects the procurement situation, because the first Norwegian submarines, they needed a discussion of a couple of months in the 60s in the Cold War context. So just to underline the security context and changes are important. And perhaps one point I would like to add or to make is about quantity, and I think this is important for Canada as well. Norway first, together with Germany, decided to buy 4 submarines. Germany would add 2 to its existing 2 12A class. And again, with the changing security context, experts were saying all the time, we need more. This is too little. Quantity matters. For Norway, now having made the decision to add 2 more, is said to have doubled its capability for surveillance, because Norway is aspiring to have a continuous submarine capacity. It wants to have submarines out in the ocean along the coastline at all time. And with long maintenance cycles and damages that you have to calculate in, you will always have 2 or 3 of them in dock in the maintenance station. So actually having the kind of quantity that I understand Canada is aspiring to, 12, especially for a country with 3 coastlines and the longest coastline, absolutely makes sense. Quantity has been critical. I think the Curex at 22 and the additional budgets and the additional threat perceptions to bring politicians in Norway and in Germany to allow for these additional capabilities.
Perfect, Robin. And thank you so much. I think the points you brought up in terms of quantities, and then in terms of why are we buying submarines and what purpose are they serving in our defense doctrines, I think is a perfect segue to our next round of questions. And here I've divided in such a way where I'm hoping to get a Canadian perspective, a South Korean, and then a Norwegian European perspective on this. And we've answered the why, so now I want to move to the what. In particular, and this question is directed toward Adam and Norman. What are the key capabilities Canada should prioritize in its next generation of submarine fleets? Is it stealth? Is it endurance? Obviously, under ice performance capabilities, given our responsibilities and our interest in the Arctic. Weapons payload and/or interlopability. Is it assembly of all the ones that I've just listed, or is there a prioritization to maybe have more under ice performance with stealth in order to have that sustained presence and surveillance capability? So I'll start with Adam first. What are your thoughts on this?
Yeah, it's a great question. I think Norm gestured to this in his first answer. The most important consideration from my point of view is range. Everywhere that Canada is going to deploy a submarine, you are going to require that endurance, that range, whether it's to the Asia-Pacific theater or to Europe or to the Arctic. The Arctic is as far, depending on where you go, of course, but generally, it's about as far to get to Davis Strait as is to get to the English Channel from bases in Halifax. So range is extraordinarily important for Canada. Now, you talk about under ice capability. And here's a really important point that I want to make sure that I mention. There is a disconnect, in my mind at least, between how these submarines are being sold or discussed at the political level, but definitely in Canadian media, and what we're actually likely to see. So if you look at what the RFI says, there's some Arctic capability, but if you look at the Sorry, we're looking at...
Yeah, sorry, Ali, you can go. You're just on mute, Adam. Sorry.
Yeah, there we go. The Arctic is front and center. Now, the reality is these vessels are not going to spend a lot of time under the ice. These are conventional submarines. These are not nuclear attack submarines. They are not going to do a lot of the things that they are being pitched as being capable of doing. They're not going to patrol the Northwest Passage. They are not going to go deep into the polar basin. Submarines defending the Arctic, at least conventional submarines that we're talking about, that means defending the entrances and the exits of the Arctic. Now, from my point of view, one of the dangers we're falling into as a country is talking about these as though they are SSNs capable of, sustained under ice operations. We are running the risk of politicians buying into that a little bit too much and beginning to add capability requirements, under ice capability requirements that perhaps are not fully necessary and are past the point of diminishing returns. You may also, in the future, find these ships, submarines, deployed into the Arctic on quote unquote sovereignty missions for political purposes. These are strategic assets, extraordinarily important, and you're sending them up north for sort of ephemeral sovereignty concerns. We did that in the 70s. We did in the 80s. A lot of ships sent up north to strengthen sovereignty. They popped around, burned a lot of fuel without a real clear understanding of what they were really accomplishing. So yes, there is that Arctic consideration, but we have to understand what we mean when we say Arctic. We are not looking at vessels heading deep into the polar basin. They are defending the entrances and the exits, and we want to be very careful that we do not find ourselves in mission creep, adding unnecessary capabilities.
Thank you, Adam. And I think the discussion on under ice performance capabilities, I think it's timely because I would argue for the general public, and especially with the emphasis on the Arctic, given the current situation that was brought up obviously earlier with President Trump's contemplation to annex, parts of the Arctic, and then obviously his threats towards Canada. There is that look and move towards the Arctic, and therefore I would argue the submarines fleet is definitely trying to be a government's response to that in terms of countering those criticisms of does Canada have the capabilities to sustain its territorial and maritime sovereignty. So I think your point is spot on. Norman, we'll shift to you. Coming from your experience with the Royal Canadian Navy, is the option of prioritization something that's discussed at all in terms of acquiring a next generation submarine fleet, or is there another focus? Is there another prioritization, whether it's during quantity of submarines, the personnel, or just the infrastructure, as Adam indicated, to have infrastructure more in line of where these submarines are going to be operated?
So, bit of history. I spent 9 years in Canadian submarines and sailed in British submarines too. So yeah, and first of all, everything Adam said, oh yeah, Adam's absolutely true on the Arctic. Okay, so let's go back to your original question and we're back. So what's the thing? Adam said range. I'd add one more: endurance and stealth. And I think stealth, what Dr. Kim brought up too, is really, really important. Okay. No, you're not going to forward. Submarines are lone wolves. You're not going to forward base them up because, hey, there's a forward base there. What's the first thing in hostilities I'm going to do? I'm going to take out that forward base. The answer is we've got bases in Esquimalt and Halifax. That's where we're going to run them out. Once you hit Clear Harbor, you don't know where they are. We talked about that before. So you need the legs to transit up there. And Adam said to get up to the Davis Strait top, it's the same as going to UK. And on the West Coast, it's just incredibly longer. Okay, so the submarine's got to be able to do a transit, and that's what they said in the RFI, of at least 3,500 nautical miles. Then spend 3 weeks on patrol, completely covert. So that suggests some form of AIP system, which I can go into thing, and then non-nuclear AIP, and then come back. Okay, so that's what they really need. Weapons, they're standard for every submarine in the world, basically. You go forward to the propulsion plant, they got torpedo tubes. In some cases, they got ballistic missile tubes. But basically, if it's a standard torpedo tube, 533 millimeters equals 21 inches. Pretty well every submarine in the world, whether it's Soviet or Russian, Chinese, Western, you name it, we all have them. Okay, that's a standard diameter. You can fire heavyweight torpedoes from that. You can also fire encapsulated missiles from that. So there's your land attack, there's your anti-ship, all of that comes in there. What's the issue for Canada, what they're looking at? Yeah, and Adam's nailed it. It's going to be political. We want to go under the ice. I was part of the team in 1987 to 89 with the nuclear submarines. I was on the naval staff. Folks, you're not surfacing through ice wherever you think. A submarine can come up maybe in a meter, a little bit more, and the ice is really, really thick, and you're not coming up. The answer is it's really, really, really nasty under there. It's constantly moving. The only way you can come up is in what they call a polynya, which is a lake of ice-free. And by the way, it's moving. And where it was before, it's not. So the reason why submarines, conventional submarines, can't do that is simply because if you had a fire on board. If you have a fire on board in a nuclear submarine, everyone's on masks, okay, until you can get up and clear smoke. You've got to find a window to come up in that. That can take days. The beauty about a nuclear submarine is they can generate their own atmosphere for those masks. A conventional submarine, you're on your battery thing and you've got whatever air is in that tank. So a conventional submarine going under deep ice is a death trap. No one's going to do it. What we can do is ice edge operations, go out there, do some stuff under there, and come back out. But really, no one really wants to go under the ice for a fight. That's really a knife fight in a phone booth. Incredible amounts of noise as the ice going over there. Any active, your torpedoes go out active, they're going to bounce sewn off everything. It's crazy. We don't know what the bottom looks like because it's never been charted. And oh, by the way, the salinity is changing left and right from melting ice. So it's not where we want. So it gets back to my point. What does Canada really want? Endurance and stealth, but also wants interoperability. Because submarines are lone wolves. They go out on their own. Everyone does that. They don't really work well in packs. Ask the Deutschers, okay? So what happens on that one? You really want to do is common weapons and common communications. That's what gets you. But things like that. So I would say that's where Canada, in fact, I know I talked to the NATO staff, that's where they're looking for understandable reasons, because Canada's role is going to be predominantly anti-submarine warfare.
Thank you, Norman. I would now like to direct now a question to Dr. Kim that stays within the similar light, but obviously focuses a little bit more on the South Korean perspective. And that again is, what capabilities has South Korea prioritized in their submarine fleet for the Indo-Pacific security and defense landscape? And from your position, are there any specific lessons Canada should take away from that tactical experience?
Thank you for the crucial question. Basically, South Korea has tailored its submarine fleet to address specific threats and operational challenges in the Indo-Pacific, as I pointed out earlier. And one of South Korea's most significant strategic focuses has been, again, stealth, achieved through the development of its advanced sonar systems and noise reduction technologies in its KSS-3 class submarines. And this capability allows South Korea to operate covertly, even in dense maritime traffic and waters heavily patrolled by rival naval forces. And another priority is endurance. The KSS-3 class submarines are equipped with, as I pointed out earlier, the AIP, which allows them to remain submerged for extended periods. I think it's 20 days plus. A key advantage in a region where vast maritime distances can separate strategic locations. And the ability to stay submerged for longer periods also provide operational flexibility in contested areas, especially in waters where surface operations may be more vulnerable to detection. And in addition, South Korea has also integrated vertical launch system VLS into the KSS-3 class, allowing submarines to launch long-range cruise missiles, which is the point Colonel Dorman mentioned earlier, a feature that enhances the fleet's strike capabilities and gives it significant power projection ability far beyond its immediate operational theater. And last but not least, the KSS-3 class is designed to operate in extreme cold with ice-reinforced hulls and low-temperature engine systems, making it adaptable for Arctic and subarctic operations. And in addition, for Canada, South Korea's emphasis on advanced stealth, endurance, and long-range strike capabilities presents useful lessons. I'm going to make it very short. In particular, Canada could benefit from integrating technologies used in the KSS-3 class to ensure that future fleet is capable of operating effectively in both Arctic and global environments. And the Arctic defense requirements Canada faces mirror some of the challenges South Korea encounters in cold weather operations, and the adaptation of technologies such as low temperature engine system and AIP will be critical for Canada's future submarines. And in addition, Canada can learn from South Korea's experience in integrating strike capabilities such as VLS, vertical launch systems for long-range cruise missile launches, ensuring that Canadian submarines can project power across distant areas and regions and fulfill both defensive and offensive roles. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Kim. Robin, we'll navigate to you now, and same kind of format in terms of the question, in terms of what capabilities has Norway, and if you can attest to this broadly from other European countries, have they prioritized in their submarine fleet for Europe's security and defense landscape, given obviously the escalation and the more prominent threat posed by Russia, particularly in the Arctic, but also to the continent as a whole. And then same thing, are there any lessons Canada should take from their tactical experience going forward in purchasing a new fleet of submarine, and as well as operating that new fleet?
Thank you. Interesting. I thought this was an interesting discussion on operating under the ice. Is it necessary? Will they do it? I mean, Mr. Bendixby, he also mentioned that these were designed for Arctic waters, cold waters. I think the crucial thing is here operating in Arctic waters and not necessarily under the ice or in the Arctic. I mean, for Norway, the most important area is what others would call the North Atlantic, or the passage from the Barents Sea into the North Atlantic, which is not necessarily ice covered. But of course, I mean, the Arctic is part of this environment. And it's interesting to remember that the model, the 212 CD is based on, I mean, is the German submarine that very much was designed not only for Arctic waters, but also for the Baltic Sea. I mean, it was for the Baltic Sea, for the North Sea, for the North Atlantic. So we would say not typically perhaps the submarine you would see as the Arctic submarine, but the two countries went together and adapted the model into something they both thought would fit the environment they were operating in. And for Norway, it's very much a long coastline, but also then from the coastline into the open water. And of course, all the other factors, stealth, range, were important to them as well. I would highlight also interoperability. With allies, with other platforms. So this is why the acquisition of the new frigates will be so important. This is why it's so important to have bought the PA-8 maritime patrol aircraft, and to have bought similar or the same capabilities that other key allies like the US, like Germany, like the UK also are operating. So for Norway, of course, this is a national submarine fleet and an independent deterrent, but it's also very much an alliance submarine. And I think this is something that Canada also should consider very much, especially when weighing on how much is this a North American or national capability. It will be and has to be an alliance capability. So you would look at what are your key allies operating in the environment where you are.
Thank you, Robin. We've had a very good, thorough discussion about, in terms of why submarines are important and why they're important for Canada, and we've just had a great discussion on, what capabilities are needed in terms of Canada pursuing a new submarine fleet, whether it's for, it's defending its Arctic security, continental, North American security, as well as our obligations to NATO, and as well as our growing strategic interest in the Pacific. But now I want to turn and look at, what's out there in terms of submarines that Canada maybe purchase going forward. Canada, at the end of last year, sent out a request for information for foreign supplied submarine design. Unfortunately, nothing much has really emerged since that time. Obviously, given the current political landscape that's going on, obviously the tariffs from the United States is taking a little bit of precedence, and then we are in the middle of election, so that is kind of clouding any kind of this further discussion. But that's what this webinar here is aiming to do. So with a request for information being sent out, there are a number of potential candidates to consider, whether it's the Korean KSS-3 class, the German Type 212 CDE, the Swedish C-71 ocean-going variant, the Spanish S-80 plus class, or the French Black Sword, Barracuda class. These are just a few examples that I pulled out, but if there's others out there that you think could be possible contenders, please bring them up. But this question here is very much focused on, could you outline the advantages and disadvantages of the following platforms, or any platforms that you're aware of, for the Canadian Patrol Submarine Project? And you can attest to one in particular if you're really focused on, or you can bring on two, or you can address all other options. Robin, we'll start with you on your thoughts on this question.
That was me. Yeah. I mean, picking up on the last point I made on interoperability. I mean, what Canada would do with the 212 CD platform, it's buying into a common design. CD stands for common design. So this is what you get. I mean, you might have the option of a common design CDE expeditionary, a slightly longer version, perhaps. But in fact, the point is that it's common design. And I think this is also what makes the submarine special, that you have two partners that have been through a very long process since 2017, had a lot of good and difficult discussions about the design, about the capabilities they want. But these discussions are over. There has been the critical design review. These submarines are in production, and they're not only in production because what makes the CD program special, and perhaps didn't came through in the first interventions, is they also agreed on joint training, on joint maintenance, on all kinds of and on developing missiles. So there are a lot of other projects associated with the CD. All this has been negotiated over a couple of years. So in a way, you could say this thing is done. It's based on a model that is already in operation, that both countries are already training on, and they are preparing together for the new model. So I mean, this in a way you could say is a big advantage, because it's in a way two countries with a strong submarine tradition have agreed on this and found this very good for them. Two countries, or at least Norway, with very similar requirements than Canada. But you could also say, of course, that buying into a CD program like this has also some potential disadvantages. I mean, you have to fight for your place in the delivery line. These two countries have just decided to add more submarines to their project, so they will have 12 together. Canada wants 12. I heard rumors that it has been promised to give Canada an early place in the line, so that it will get its first submarine. It would get its first submarine in 2035. But of course, I mean, this is something that will have to be negotiated. And buying into a program with two partners is sharing risks, is sharing costs, and will lead to discussions. And perhaps another disadvantage, if you want, is of course that, I mean, you couldn't add 1, 2, 3,000 additional requirements. So this is what you get, and it's probably absolutely non-negotiable. So in a way, there's something different from the frigates, and it can be an advantage or a disadvantage. For Norway, it's an advantage, because they have found out with the last frigate programs that once these things become old, go bust, they are alone with them. They're too complicated. So the German-Norwegian project, the CD model, is now seen as a model for all future programs, because you will always buy something together with an ally, something that has been proven and is already done, and that you will not be alone with in the future. So in conclusion, there are probably more advantages with buying into such a partnership, especially because these are partners that are like-minded, share interests, allies, and so on. This is also why the three countries agreed on a strategic partnership last year. But of course, this will come with some risks, and multilateral cooperation is always difficult. And it will be with two partners. I mean, you will have to fight for your place in the program naturally.
Perfect, thank you, Robin. Norman, I see you taking notes, and that's fitting because I would like to get your perspective on this, given your past expertise, but also with your role with CFN. So, anything to build on from what Robin was saying, or as well as the other platforms that I've listed here, or if you're aware of any other ones. What are the advantages, disadvantages of pursuing the next type of Canadian Patrol submarine going forward?
Yeah, and I would agree with a lot of what you said and everything like that, particularly what we at the Navy calls, or we would say, no orphans, no more unicorns, right? Canada has 4 Victoria class. They're the only ones in the world. So anyone that's building a submarine offering that's in service with their parent Navy is quite attractive. Okay, because we have the reason the Oberons lasted for so long. I spent, like I said, a bunch of years in them. We had daily calls between Portsmouth, England, Halifax, Nova Scotia, and Sydney, Australia, because we were just constantly talking, and that's how you keep it going. So what I'll do is I did some open source stuff, okay, but it's out there, and I've gone in the list of countries that you put out in your thing, because I printed it out and wrote on it, so it's a sort of thing. So it's no in alphabetical order or nothing like that. So, and full disclosure, for Dr. Kim, yeah, about 3 weeks ago, I was standing underneath a KSS-3 Batch 2 just about to be launched. So yes, an impressive submarine. So the thing is, the first is a proven capability and performance. That's an issue. That's an issue that Canada's talked about, where they go. And the issue there, first one, for the case of the Korean KSS-3, they currently have 3 Batch 1 in service, okay? There's differences between Batch 1 and Batch 2, but basically going from 6 vertical missiles to 10, there's a bunch of things, but not that big. So those things are on patrol today, okay? They happen to meet and exceed every single high-level mandatory requirement, okay, today. That was in the RFI. And they got a capacity to build them. And this is where Robin was getting onto that. You may have a little bit of fight. I agree with them, because that's a pretty impressive order book. With respect to the Germans, you can't tell me the Germans can't build a great submarine. Come on, guys. They are formidable, and everyone knows that. So yes, it'll be part of a multinational thing that's attractive. And they were shortlisted for the Dutch submarine project. And why is that important for Canada? Canada has always had a very close relationship with the Dutch submarines going back to Wayon. In fact, when we were looking at replacing the Oberons initially in the early days, we wanted the Walrus. Needless to say, we didn't get it. That brings up a point. The Canadian Navy has never got the submarine it wants. It's a political decision, okay? But anyways, we're going to get down to submarines. I say, the Germans got that. The issue right now is, of course, capacity and getting in there. The submarine doesn't exist today, so it's hard to. Everyone knows it will exist. Everyone knows it will be a very good submarine, but it doesn't exist today. And the issue is no changes. Can you live with that? Yeah, and I think the head of the Navy's made that pretty clear, no changes, but they want something. But they've got a very, very full order book that, Norway's got 4, but the Germans just up there to 6. I understand Norway's about to exercise the options for 2 more, and I can understand why. So that very shortly, that'll be a drumbeat of 12 submarines. The first one's supposed to be delivered in 2029. Canada is back against the wall, okay? We should have been having a discussion 10 years ago. We're not. Swedish, again, don't have a lot of experience in building large submarines because they're a Baltic Navy. That said, remember, they did design and build for the Australian Collins class, which is a 3,400-ton submarine. That submarine will not exist in the Swedish Navy, okay? Had the C-71 been selected for the Dutch Orca, Yes, it would, but it wasn't. So right now the Swedes are building the A-26. It'll be a good submarine, but it's much, much smaller, and it's designed for what they're dealing with, okay? And again, capacity for build. Spanish S-80 plus, okay, they've got 2 in service right now. They don't have the AFP system fitted. They said it'll be in the 3rd one. We don't know what it looks like, okay? It's not proven. It's out there. And if you take a look at the history of the Spanish build, that's been quite lengthy. That's being kind, okay? So not to say they can't do it, but they've had a lot of problems with that getting it out there. It was notably not shortlisted for the Dutch submarine project, which there's a question there, why not, I think. But the question there begins, can Avantia do it, okay? We don't know, okay? And that's brings some risk. The French Black Sword Barracuda class, that, as you know, initially came up for the Australian conventional one. They won that until they stopped and went to AUKUS. It's a nuclear submarine with a conventional package. So the question on that one, there's a lot to be said. Submarines are designed to do what they do. A nuclear submarine doesn't come to periscope depth until it wants to. A conventional submarine has to spend a lot of time periscope set, and it's much slower power. You don't want to put a lot of power because you're going to throw a lot of wake up and everything. So it'll be interesting to see. The French have said also to the Dutch, 10 years in contract award. Fine, that's a hard number, got it. That's going to be outside the Canadian parameters as listed in the RFI. But remember, it will be a political decision. The government of Canada may say, well, sorry, Navy, you're going to eat that. Don't know. But right now, it's a game to build drumbeat. Those are the 4. You know, can the French build? Of course, they're building, they're rebuilding their SSN fleet right now, which are about to start rebuilding their SSBN fleet. Plus, they do a lot of export with the Scorpions. And so, yeah, absolutely. But again, is it capacity and everything? But the bottom line is that submarine will not be in service with the French Navy because they only use nuclear submarines. Those are thought processes that go through the laundry list. And the Japanese, we have heard, have formally said they're not participating. And that sort of sums up who's out there building submarines that cannot be interested, because the Americans will not build a submarine for Canada because they only build nuclear submarines. The British are in the concept of rebuilding their SSBN fleet and their SSN fleet.
Thank you, Norman. Dr. Kim, we'll head to you now. And in terms of, is there anything in particular like the Korean KSS-3 class that you think would be advantageous to, the Canadian defense landscape? Or, in your experience, have you had any other, discussions with your colleagues on different types of platforms in terms of submarine designs that you think would be a good fit for the Canadian Patrol Submarine Project?
Okay, thank you for the crucial question. I would like to center my focus on KSS-3 class subs. 3 key advantages that I have found out after having discussions with the Navy officers as well as the shipbuilding people. The KSS-3 class offers several notable advantages for Canada's future submarine fleet because, first of all, the adaptability for Arctic operation is one of the most significant benefits, as South Korea's experience in designing submarines that can operate in cold and under ice environment aligns well with Canada's northern defense needs. And the KSS-3 class features ice-reinforced hulls and low-temperature engine optimization, which are essential for operating in the extreme cold of the Arctic. And secondly, as I pointed out earlier, the air-independent propulsion system extends the submarine's submerged endurance, enabling it to operate for long durations without needing to resurface, which is crucial for Canada's vast and remote maritime territory. And last but not least, as I mentioned earlier, the vertical launch system, the VLS, for cruise missiles provides enhanced strike capability, making the KSS-3 a versatile platform for both defensive and offensive operations, whether in the Arctic or during global NATO missions. And now shifting gears to disadvantages. There are several of them. First of all, the cost of the KSS-3 class, given its advanced capabilities, could be rather a bit barrier to its acquisition for Canada's budget. Additionally, integrating a foreign platform like the KSS class into Canada's existing naval forces may pose operational challenges, particularly in terms of interoperability with Canada's River-class destroyers and other surface assets. And this could require additional investments in communication systems and training for Canadian crews to adapt to the specific requirements of the KSS-3 class. And another consideration is the logistical challenges of maintaining and servicing a foreign supplied platform, which could lead to potential issues related to spare parts and supply chains. But however, in my perspective, these disadvantages or challenges could be mitigated through partnership with local shipyards for assembly and maintenance, as well as strong local supply chains for critical components. So in sum, I think personally, I think that South Korea's KSS-3 submarine clearly stands out among its peers in terms of long-range operational capability, integration of strategic weapon systems, and technological maturity and immediate availability. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Kim. And lastly, Adam, we'll go to you for your kind of final thoughts on this question. And given from what you've heard from your other panelists on board, is there one platform that you think has the strategic advantage to go all the way in terms of the Canadian Patrol Submarine Project? And what are, in your opinions, are the designs from our international partners that would be very beneficial for Canada to have in its future submarine fleet?
Well, thanks, Andrew. Now, not to be anticlimactic in my answer, but I won't offer you a suggested design. That is outside of my area of expertise. That's something that Norm would be able to nail down, but it's just not something that I would venture. What I will highlight, though, and Norm, you touched on this a little bit, is one of the big considerations that we've kind of danced around a little bit, but have not really zoomed in on, and that is delivery times. We've talked about that as one of many considerations: stealth, range, technological capability, etc. The reality is it's not 2005 anymore, where we have the leisurely time to spend 20 years doing those studies, designing and building these systems. We need them about 5 years ago, is the reality. So we need them now. So what I would maybe leave you with as my key takeaway for what is most essential within that ecosystem of considerations is delivery times and how realistic it is to put one of these systems in Halifax Harbor and have Canadian sailors on them.
Thank you, Adam. And with that round of question, I'd like to now, we do have 23 minutes left, so I'd like to move to some Q&A that we've had from our audience. And one in particular that I would like to share in particular, Robin, I'll direct this one to you, if I may. We have a question here asking, Norway's program is considered cost effective. Would it be good to know what that means? Would this be helped by knowing some cost metrics, a cost per sub life cycle, or the cost per fleet of the submarine platform itself?
I think the main factor here, the main consideration, is actually the partnership aspect, and of course this would be even bigger with not 12 but 24 potentially. I mean, this will be at the end of the 30s, but a large fleet of submarines. When you think about maintenance, when you think about spare parts, when you think about not least also training and interoperability. As I said, part of the German-Norwegian program is joint training, building joint training educational facilities. They're building joint maintenance facilities. I mean, these are questions of scale and also a security aspect of I mean, some of what has been mentioned as disadvantages perhaps with other submarines that you mitigate with having a large fleet of basically of submarines. among close partners that are developed in close cooperation. And I mean, as far as I know, the Canadian Navy is very very familiar with the German-Norwegian program already through training, very much involved. So I think many Canadian sailors already know the program, have been through some of the courses, have sailed and know this. So this will also be something where you where a new partner could fit in quite easily, because the whole program has been designed to take in new partners. I mean, this hasn't materialized so far, to the disappointment of the two partners. And as I said earlier, it definitely isn't going to be all smooth and all easy, but I think this is where the potential cost effectiveness comes in, a well proven and then large fleet.
Thank you, Robin. Norman, if I may, I'll direct this question to you, and I'll just rephrase it a bit given the circumstances. But we have a question here, essentially asking, from all the candidates that we've outlined here. There is the assumption, obviously, that they will be built abroad and simply purchased for cash by Canada. But this question here, again, I'll rephrase it. Once Canada purchases this next fleet of submarines, can you attest as to how long the life cycle is for these submarines until Canada has to design a new submarine fleet? And whenever that time comes, is there a possibility with more interlopable and capability sharing platform, is there an opportunity to maybe build not this generation but future generations of Canadian submarines here in Canada, given the push for a much more made in Canada military industry and then military force?
Yeah, one that's come up a lot, and sort of things like that. And yet, if you've ever been into a shipyard, then you go into a shipyard that specializes in warships, and then you go into a shipyard that specializes in submarines, you're ratcheting up a whole lot of stuff. The answer is, could Canada put in place a shipyard that could build submarines? Absolutely. And the last time we did that was 1915. That's a 1-5. Okay? That's over 110 years ago. So the answer is no, we don't. So you want to put in place a shipyard, you're going to have to bring in a lot of specialized equipment that can cold roll, say, very high yield steel, put all that. This is a very, very specialized thing. It's much more akin to the aviation, I'd say, on a heavier level than it is to shipbuilding. So could we do it? Absolutely. But it's going to take a lot of time to put that in place. It's very, very expensive. And you have to get the folks that can do that and maintain them. The most one is mill welders, by the way. And then you're going to have that. And you're going to build a dozen submarines and then nothing. And then you're going to let that go and then wait a bunch of years and start it again. This is what we've seen with all our boom and bust. So the answer, unless Canada plans to export submarines, which we've never really done any warship export at all, then it's sunk costs that you're never going to recoup and what I think. So I think that everyone's looked at, we'll build offshore, we take advantage of scales of investment other countries have done into that, production lines. And I've been to Germany, I have been to England, and submarine yards, and I've been to Korean submarine yards. Okay, you see what goes into them and everything like that, and that's what we need to go. So I don't really see us. We've never done that before. Why would we? We'll buy off the shelf because, quite frankly, it makes more sense. What we do need to do is get into the maintenance end of it and own that. And that's whoever the OEM is, the original equipment manufacturer. They're critical to be part of that in-service support, and that's what we learned the hard way out of the Victoria class. So yeah. So the answer is, could we? Yeah. But would we? No. Why not? Why? It's just too expensive. Did that answer the question?
And that did. It was a great point. So I thank you for that. I knew you would have some great insights on that question. That's why I directed it to you. Adam, I'll direct this question to you. And more of a political perspective I'm looking for you, and just in terms of your analysis of it. But we have a question here. To what extent should Canada consider our submarine procurement as an opportunity to also advance our foreign policy and strategic interests? For example, purchasing from the Koreans may further open opportunities to deepen our presence and defense ties with nations in the Indo-Pacific, while also, going with a European option could maybe signal an effort to double down on our commitments to NATO and our transatlantic ties. Is this do you see this thinking more along the lines of what Ottawa is doing in terms of, is there a political signal that they're hoping to put forward with the purchase of these submarines? And if they are kind of going forward in that direction, is that kind of the wrong way? Because as we said previously during this discussion, we're not looking at the force capacity requirements that Canada genuinely needs to have its subsurface capability platform that was actually fitted for our Canadian purposes for our defense.
Yeah, that's a great question. It's hard to really determine how different considerations are weighted. So of course that will be a consideration. I would guess and hope that it's not a primary consideration. I would hope that capability and, as I said, delivery time will be first and foremost at the forefront of government thinking. But of course, we always consider the political relationship with our country of origin when we're building anything of this size and significance. I don't think the ties to Norway, Germany are necessarily that important when it comes to signaling solidarity with Europe. I think we have that. I think Canada's place in NATO, I think its dedication to European defense, to Ukraine, is solid and is universally understood. The acquisition of German submarines would help, but I don't think it would make a substantive change. If anything, I think what the Europeans are looking for from Canada is capacity, is capability. So if we are to bring on 10 submarines, even if they are from Korea, if we can deploy them into European waters, I think NATO and I think the Europeans would be quite happy with that. Now, Canada is, of course, looking to expand its presence in the Pacific, but I'm not sure we've quite decided on how we're going to do that. We have significant economic ties with Korea. This would increase that. But at the end of the day, from a military strategic perspective, more important than those defense ties is, again, the deployment of the assets once we have them. And that's the big question. What are we going to do with these submarines? Are they balanced 6 and 6 or 5 and 5 on each coast? Are we going to weight the Atlantic or the Pacific? Probably more than our country of origin choice. The deployment decisions we make are going to that'll be the big deal.
Perfect. Thank you, Adam. And Dr. Kim, I have a question for you. And this is in terms of the Korean experience, but also I think any lessons that you can draw from that into Canada. And it's mainly directed towards the ongoing issue of recruitment and retention in key posts, specifically when it comes to having crew that have the knowledge and the skills to sustain, repair, and to operate a submarine. What role does artificial intelligence play in the design and operation of a submarine fleet? In particular, can you attest to how AI can help reduce crew requirements and that can address ongoing recruitment and retention challenges faced by South Korea, and maybe how that can maybe contribute to a better manner in which Canada should incorporate AI into its next submarine fleet?
Okay, thank you for 2 questions. First of all, sharing South Korea's experience in training our trainees. In the 1990s, we run 18 subs. South Korean Navy had 18 subs, but back in the 1990s, we first imported from HDW from Germany. And we had to send our crews to Germany to acquire these necessary knowledges and training skills. It took about a decade to fully equip our crews to operate the German subs, and eventually we started modifying those German subs, and exporting. It took about like 15 to 20 years. So it's doable, but it's a time-consuming process from South Korea's experience. But for South Korea, due to North Korean submarine threat, we had a time restraint. We had to make it very fast, but nevertheless, it took more than a decade to fully operate the subs. And moving on to the role of AI and designing subs and whatever, my thoughts on that would be that AI is poised basically to play a transformative role in both the design and operation of Canada's next generation submarine fleet, offering a wide array of enhancements that improve operational efficiency, increase capabilities, and reduce new requirements. In terms of design, basically AI can be used in the simulation and optimization of key systems such as sonar, sensor arrays, and propulsion systems, allowing designers to create submarines that are more efficient, quieter, and better equipped for detection avoidance. And AI-driven simulations can also be used to test different operational scenarios, providing valuable insights into how submarines will perform in various environmental conditions, including under ice and or in crowded maritime zones. That would be my response.
Excellent. Well, I do want to, before we conclude, I do want to, extend a huge gratitude and a thank to today's speakers for participating in this panel. From this discussion that we've had, it's clear that the path to a modern and capable Canadian submarine fleet is both a challenging and critical undertaking. The decisions that we make politically, militarily, or industrially today will undoubtedly shape Canada's defense capabilities for decades to come, ensuring that we remain secure, resilient, and prepared to face the evolving threats of the future. I would also like to extend my gratitude for the audience for joining us this evening, as well as providing thought-provoking and great discussion point questions that have contributed to our debate and discussions today. Lastly, I would also like to inform everyone that is watching today that this webinar will be recorded and it will be published on IPD's website. I also encourage everyone to subscribe to IPD's newsletters, as well as follow IPD on social media for any further updates on future roundtables and publications. And with that, gentlemen, thank you and good night.
Thank you.